What is up, everybody? Gary Simon here. Today we got a good one because we're mixing two worlds that some say you should not mix. And of course, those two worlds are low to no code tools such as Framer, which is the topic of this video, and also code in the form of the GreenSock animation platform, otherwise known as the acronym GSAP. Now, just take a look at some of these examples of what you can create with GreenSock. Now, if you're unaware of what GreenSock is, it's simply a JavaScript animation library. And this means you have to understand JavaScript. Now, when you integrate GreenSock into Framer, you basically unlock superpowers that you're not able to get with your UI. And GreenSock can unlock, like I said, certain features and abilities. And I'm going to show you just a couple of them and also how to integrate GreenSock into Framer. Oh, and real quick, if you're really interested in learning JavaScript and GreenSock animation platform specifically, then definitely take my new course, Advanced Front Ends. You're going to learn how to use GreenSock animation platform with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and all this can be applied to your new Framer abilities. All right, let's get started. Okay, I am here in Framer with a brand new document, and all I did is just create a frame right here for desktop and a type layer. So if you look at my layer section, it's literally just desktop and get in touch right here. Let's say, for instance, you wanted to create a type-based sequence animation where each individual character kind of comes up out of a mask and animates into place. So in order to do this, we need to utilize GreenSock, and first thing that we're going to do before we hop into that part is we don't want to just take this get in touch layer and start animating that. We want to add a frame around it. So right click, add frame. And what this is going to do for this particular effect that we're trying to achieve is right down here, overflow hidden. That's what we want, which means if we grab the type layer and we move it down, we'll see that it clips, it hides itself essentially. And that's what we're going to be taking advantage of with the help of the GreenSock animation platform. So if you were to try to do this with the UI in and of itself, you would have a real difficult time. You would have to do things manually. We can do things with code, which is the benefit of this. So the first thing that we're going to do in order to get this to work is create a code override. So you click plus down here, and then we're going to click select and then new file. All right. Under new file, we're going to go ahead and specify a new component, and we're going to give this a name of title animation or something like that. All right. So then this big scary code window pops up, and if you've never seen this before, don't worry about it because, you know, pretty much everything in here, Control A, we're going to gut. All right. A lot of it's just demo stuff. You don't need this code. So we're going to save that. And again, if we go back, you'll see if we select this and we go to our layers, we want to make sure that this is applied, the new code document that override, or not the override, the component that we created. We want to make sure it's applied to the frame, okay? Or actually, no, we want to make sure it's applied to the type. So we're going to go ahead and it's not showing us the actual file because we don't have any code in it. So if we go back to assets and come over here to title animation, we have our empty area. So the first thing that we need to do is basically import a couple things at the top of this file. One of them is going to be specific to Framer, and this is all built on React, by the way. You don't have to know React in order to do this. You just have to understand some basic JavaScript, and that's real important to understand. So I'm going to go back to my reference code here just to make my life a little bit easier. And I'm going to just copy some of these things, and we'll go over them real quickly to describe kind of what's happening here. So you can see right here we have import all as React from React and import override from Framer. Ignore these. Don't worry about them. Now, for us, we do want to worry about a few things. Actually, I don't need scroll trigger. Just to show you, or to demonstrate what scroll trigger is, it's kind of like what Framer already has worked in when you make things appear based on scroll. This is like that, except that this is steroids. All right, this gives you much more flexibility and features with the actual scroll trigger. We'll get into that in a different video, but for now we just need GSAP, which is the acronym for GreenSock Animation Platform, and then split type. Split type will allow us to literally specify that heading, and then it will automatically, in the DOM, which is the document object model, it'll automatically put each one of those characters that it finds into its own little DOM element, and then we can animate that programmatically very easily. It's not complex, trust me. All right. The next part that we're going to have is to register the GSAP plugin. All right. Oh, that's for scroll trigger. I'm an idiot. Sorry about that. The rest of my code did not utilize that. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy just this part. Actually, no, I'm going to copy all of it. And what I'm going to do is kind of start here at the top. We call this title animation. I'm going to name this title animation as well. All right, all this fancy stuff right here, this is just a function, and the utilize TypeScript, Framer does. And the part that you really want to mind is the name of this right here. Whatever you name this function, title animation, you want to be able to utilize that. You want to be able to remember that, because that's what we're going to choose if we go back here. So if we go back and I try to scale down my UI here, and we go to code overrides with the actual type layer specified, we can choose right there, title animation. Now you can see it showed up because we actually added the code. And then you want to choose for the override title animation. All right, now nothing, well, at this point in time, nothing's happening just for a couple reasons, but we'll get back to the actual code. So in title animation, essentially, what we have next here, and let me just import this, is basically all your code and your logic you want to put inside of React use effect here. And this is where all the GreenSock stuff is. So first it's imported, that's set and forget. Don't worry about that. Then you do all of your coding inside of this React use effect poke right there. So essentially, for our particular use case, this is not named, and it's not paragraphs. This is just a single headline, essentially. But what we're doing is we're creating a constant called paragraphs, and we're passing it through a split type function, which is imported up here, split type. And then we use text element dot query selector h1. All right. So what that is essentially doing is it's finding the H1 element, and right now we don't have an H1 element, and that's because if we come back over here and we select our type layer, make sure we're selected on it, and we come over to styles, we click new style, heading 1. All right, so now it's an H1 element as far as our HTML markup is concerned. And if we go back here and we hit play, well, I probably shouldn't have showed you that right away, but that is very cool. That is the intended effect. And so let's go back real quick because I want to describe what's happening in title animation a little bit more. All right, so basically we're gaining access right here to our H1 element. And then just to console log this, you can do that just to make sure you have access to it if something's not working. And then what we use is GSAP and then the from method. Now you can use from method, to method, or from to. Now what this means is that you're basically, if you specify from, it's going to take your element that you specify in the first parameter, which is our paragraphs, which is really just the headline, dot chars, which means characters. And again, this is a split type thing right here because you're getting access to the individual lines of text and also the characters. So we want to animate each individual character, so we pass it into the first parameter of the from function, okay? Then we have right here our parameters that we can actually animate. So this is going to essentially look for all of the DOM elements that have that are characters, and it's going to move them at a Y percentage, which means on the vertical axis, it's going to animate them from, because we're using the from method, from 100% on the Y axis. So what this is doing is essentially it will take this type, and just like I showed you before, if I move it down, it's hiding them. And it's doing that for all of the letters, okay? Then, come back here. what it's doing is also it's staggering it. So this is a property, it's an optional property, but if you have multiple elements that are being returned and animated, and you want to create a slight offset so that they don't all come in at the same time, then this is where you do that. And this is in seconds, so 0.03 seconds. Duration is 2 seconds. We have a certain easing, elastic out. This is very cool because if I remove this and save it and I show you the animation, all right, that's not very cool. They came in almost at the same time, but when you add certain different types of easing, then it can make it really cool. So for instance, if we add that back, let's get this right here, save that, go back, you can see how much dramatically it changes. Real quick tip is if you go to GreenSock, or you go to Google and type GreenSock eases or easing or something like that, you'll find this cool little easing visualizer, and this will tell you everything you need to use. So like for elastic, you could choose elastic in, out, and then here's the code. You just copy your actual ease right there. Very, very cool, and it can very drastically alter how your animation appears. Okay. So outside of that, oh, I forgot. I did utilize scroll trigger in this example, but I decided to throw that out for this. But if you add scroll trigger here in this property, in this context, then you can make this animation only show up based on a scroll location. This is kind of extending outside of the scope of this tutorial, so I'm just going to remove that. And by removing it, it means it's just going to automatically animate this no matter what. And it's not going to be based on tied on scroll. So that right there is a real simple use case for animating individual things. And here's the thing. This isn't just for text. You can specify classes and put it on like 5 different cards, for instance, and then you can use a stagger animation for that. And so let's go ahead and do that real quick as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F for the frame, and we're just going to create some rectangles, essentially. Now, because I'm such a weirdo, I want some radiuses on my rectangles. Okay, now I'm going to put this one here. We're going to duplicate it, and we'll center this one. Let's put this right there, and then we'll duplicate that one, and we'll get this lined up. Okay, just to make these a little bit of a different color, I'm just going to move these over. The color value here, color slider. Okay. Now, what I also want to do is I'm going to take all of these, and we want to make sure that we can attach a class essentially to this in order to gain access to all of them. And so the way we can do this is, if I refer back to my other documentation, is I'm going to copy this code, and this right here is a component. So I'm going to go back. And what we want to do is we're going to add a code override, and we're going to choose new file, and we're just going to say cards class. And then I'm going to Control A and Control V this stuff right here. So import type component type from React. And then you can see we're naming this one called with class. We're going to choose that in the drop-down selector. Now with class inside of here, you can forget about all this stuff right here. We're only interested in this stuff. Actually, specifically right here. And I got this from like official Figma documentation for adding classes, for instance. So this is how you add a class to an element. And then that way we can reference it specifically in GreenSock in another component, essentially. So we're calling this one card. So each of these 3 card or elements will have a card attached to them. So that's cards class. We go back, and what we want to do is, again, we want to make sure these all have our cards class with class right there. And so what that does is if you hit play and you hit F12, you will see that if we just select one of them and just hover, look at that right up there. See where it says .card at the end? I can't move my mouse because it disappears. But it shows .card, and that means that's a class. So now we have access to that, and that's what you should see as well. If you don't, then you screwed something up. And you can start smashing your desktop like I normally would as well. Now, let's take all these. Let's add a frame. And then on the frame itself, we're going to create a new code override. And this will be a component. So let's see, new file, new component. We'll call this cards animation. Hit create. All right, so for our cards animation, let's go ahead and paste this. All right, so up here, we could see that, let me make my thing a little bit larger. We're importing all from React. We're importing GreenSock animation and the override right here. All right, okay, so we called this one animate boxes. Again, we'll want to specify that as well. In the dropdown, when we get past that point, we don't have to really see this part, all this stuff. So essentially, we have in our hook right here, we have const boxes, document.querySelector all, find the class. What this is doing is it's looking over the entire HTML document, all the HTML markup, and it's looking at each element and finding any element that has a class of card. Now, we just added that to 3 of the cards. So it will find 3. Now, const headline, document.querySelector H1, you can gain access that way as well if you want to access specific things, like one specific element. Use query selector for that. For a collection, use query selector all. This is vanilla JavaScript. It's just basic JavaScript. It has nothing to do with React or Angular or Vue or whatever. And if you really want to learn any of that type of stuff, you have to start with vanilla JavaScript. And so I do have a free course on vanilla JavaScript. I'll try to remember to link that. If not, make sure just type JavaScript in my channel search and you'll find it. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this example as well is because when it comes to GreenSock, you can animate like we did over here, a title animation where you're just using GSAP from. That's called a tween. It's just a simple tween. There's nothing connected to it. But if you really want to create interesting sequence-based animations, you want to use the timeline instead. So note, we create a constant called timeline, bind it to the GreenSock timeline right here. Then you can do this cool stuff where you chain things together. So timeline dot, remember you can still use from, to, and from to, okay? And for from, what we're doing is we're taking the card and we're saying y% negative 110. And I did it 110 because I can still see the very top of the card when I just did 100%. And then a stagger of 0.2. And we can chain these on top of each other. So really, what happens is this animation runs first, then this will wait for that to complete, and then this will run, and then this as well. So let's go ahead and save that. We'll go back to home, make sure we have this selected in cards animation, animate boxes. Let's go ahead and hit play, and let me reload that. So there's actually multiple things happening here. First thing that's happening, we obviously have our animations occurring at the same time of these boxes coming down. Oopsie, I should not have refreshed. Okay. And so they're sliding down and then they're scaling down. So after they're scaling down, we take the text and we turn it gray just for the fun of it. I mean, it's not a real use case, but I'm just showing you how dynamic and flexible this is. So if I go back and we click on assets and I choose cards animation, you'll see this is the code that achieves that animation with those cards specifically. Very, very cool. And it's not just the cards. As you can see, if I zoom up, you will see that we passed in the headline this time, which we grabbed the H1 element. Now, if you had multiple H1 elements, this would break. So you wouldn't want to use this. If you have multiple H1 elements that you want to do stuff to, you can use the query selector all, and your code would have to change slightly. But that's basically the gist. You can really unlock a massive amount of potential if you understand GreenSock animation platform. Do you have to use it? No, but if you really want to, if you see a specific effect, it may only be achievable through GreenSock or through, by modifying through code overrides. So I'm going to be creating a course for Framer specifically, where we take stuff that's designed in Figma and then we framerize it. And yes, we will have advanced stuff like this as well in the course to really unlock the true power of web technologies within the context of low to no code tools like Framer. All right, everybody, hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to subscribe, check out DesignCourse.com, and I'll see you very, very soon. Goodbye.